Hi guys, today we're talking about the leopard gecko and what they're like in captivity and in the wild. Leopard geckos are one of the most popular pet reptiles in the hobby. They are to be known as one of the first reptiles to be kept domesticated, and they're very personable, friendly, and that's why they make great beginner species. So we're gonna break it down. We're gonna talk about what they're like in the wild, and then we'll talk about what they're like in captivity, like how to keep them. The leopard gecko, or the Eublepharis macularis, say that 10 times fast, is a ground-dwelling species of gecko. They live in dry, rocky, desert climates. They are native to South Asia, around Afghanistan, Pakistan, Nepal, India, and in some parts of Iran. Due to their nocturnal nature, leopard geckos will spend most of their day hiding in burrows or rocky outcrops. Leopard geckos can be found in small colonies in the wild, which is interesting because in captivity they're known to be solitary animals, but actually they will hide in these rocky outcrops together as groups. So their diet is pretty straightforward. Leopard geckos are opportunistic hunters, so they will eat pretty much anything they can as long as it is an invertebrate or an insect. That is the main source of their diet. Sometimes in the wild they'll eat small vertebrate items like mouse pups or other species of geckos or lizards, but their main diet is insects or invertebrates. So when the leopard gecko eats, a portion of their meal's nutrients goes into their tail. That's why they have this plumpy tail. It actually acts as a fat storage for them. So when they brumate or hibernate during the winter time, they can last for months underground without having to hunt. The food is stored in their tail and it will keep them nourished for months on end. Their tails not only will store fat, they have these bumps and ridges in their tails. They're called fracture planes. What the gecko can do is if they start to feel threatened by a predator, or if a predator has a hold of them, they can break off a piece of their tail at that fracture plane and it'll grow back. And you can tell that a leopard gecko has regenerated tail by the smoothness of their tail. So if it was broken off right here, for instance, all this would fall off and it would start to grow back, but it would kind of grow back in a smooth, like lumpy motion, and all of it would be smooth. So that's something really interesting about their tails. And like I said, during the winter months, the leopard gecko will bury itself under the ground when it reaches about 50 degrees, a little like low 60s. That's when they'll start to burrow. They'll burrow underground, and that's where they will remain for the rest of the winter, and they survive off the fat storage in their tails. Okay, so now that we've talked about what they are like in the wild, let's talk about how to keep them in captivity. Now, before I start, I just want to say this is a guide. It's a care guide. Everything I'm saying is not Bible. You don't have to take everything I say exactly. Do your own research and do what works best for you and your animals, you and your geckos. That's what's most important. So yeah, let's get started. For housing these guys, you want a minimum enclosure of 40 gallons for an adult. Minimum. That means that is the smallest, that is the smallest size enclosure that you want for an adult leopard gecko. Now, I know what you're thinking. Well, you have Banana in a 10-gallon. Well, that's because Banana is not an adult. Banana's a juvenile at best. She's about maybe, I don't even think she's a year old yet. She might be about a year old, but she's in a 10-gallon. However, she will be upgrading to a 25 soon. So why you don't want to just start off your leopard gecko in a 40-gallon enclosure. In my opinion, I think it's best to start them off small and slow. These guys, when they're babies, they're like this big. They're small little guys. Everything is a threat to them. And you move them into this gigantic enclosure, because for them it is gigantic. It's stressful. So we don't want to put somebody super small into a really big enclosure. So I recommend for babies and juveniles starting with a 10-gallon and then working your way up from there. Now, that being said, with your adult leopard gecko, you don't have to just put them in a 40-gallon. You could put them in a 50-gallon, 60, 75, whatever you want. You could even put them in a 4x2x2 if you really wanted to, which is, I think, is 150 gallons. But 40 is the bare minimum for an adult. These guys climb a lot. They hunt for their food a lot. So they are very active species in the nighttime. And so it's really important that you give them their space. Next, we're going to talk about lighting. So for lighting these guys, you want to give them a day and night cycle because they are nocturnal. Some people would say that they're crepuscular, meaning they're active at dawn and dusk. However, in the wild, they are more nocturnal than anything. So you want your lights on for 12 hours and you want them off for 12 hours. Now, if you have issues with heating or keeping your enclosure warm, which we'll talk about in a minute, you can use a ceramic heat emitter. So you can have your lights on for 12 hours and your ceramic heat emitter on for 12 hours. In the summertime, you can give them more light. So right now, because we just had daylight savings time, I'm giving her 14 hours of light and the rest with the lights off. If you want to make this easier for you, instead of having to remember when you need to turn on and off lights, you can get timers. These are things you can find at any reptile store, but you can also find them at the hardware store, and that is my hack for you because it's going to be 10 times cheaper getting it from like Lowe's or Menards or Home Depot than you would be spending at the reptile store. So that is your hack for you for lighting, at least. Now, the big question, do they need UVB? Short answer, no. They don't need UVB in order to survive. It's not going to give them like metabolic bone disease or any type of bone issues or anything like that. However, it is beneficial for them if you do give it to them. No animal is going to be hurt by getting UVB. Obviously, if you can afford it and you can supply it, then sure, why not? But no, it is not necessary to have it. Okay, let's talk about temperature. You want to give your gecko a temperature gradient in their enclosure, which means you want a warm side and you want a cool side. You want there to be a range. Because they are ectothermic, they don't heat and cool down their own bodies like we do. So they need this gradient for when they're feeling too warm or when they're feeling too cold, so they can go to one side or the other to heat up or cool down. For your warm side, you want a range of 85 to 92 with a basking area of 94 to 97 degrees. For the cool side, you want anywhere from 70 to 77 degrees. Now, let me just say this. Like I said, this is a guide. If your enclosure is 84 degrees or 84.7, your gecko is gonna be fine. It's not gonna hurt them. It is not going to be detrimental to their physical or mental health if it's a little bit above or below. This is just a guideline. It can range anywhere from 85 to 92 in the area. If it's 93, they'll be fine. It's okay. I promise that it's okay. As for humidity in the enclosure, which is something you should think about even though they are a drier species, you want it between 30 to 40%, which is about average for a home, I would say. You don't want it super humid because you don't want to give them like respiratory issues, but you want it to replicate their natural habitat. So you want to give them about 30 to 40% humidity. However, you want to give them a humid hide that is about 70 to 80% humidity. And this is why leopard geckos have issues with shedding if they don't have enough humidity. And this is something that rescues see all the time. People aren't giving their leopard geckos the proper humidity requirements because they think, oh, well, they're a gecko. They live in the sand, blah, blah, blah. Well, first of all, they don't even live in the sand. Second of all, yes, they are a drier species, but they have to shed their skin. And it's easier for them to do that if it's humid. Geckos will come into rescues missing their toe tips. They'll have like necrotic tissue or dying tissue or anything like that because they're having issues shedding because it's not humid enough. So please, please, please make sure that you are adding a humid hide to your enclosure. Mist it down once a day. I don't know if you guys can tell, but do you see like, oh, we got a runner. We got a runner. Do you guys see she has like these little toe tips? They have tiny little toenails. They have these little tiny toenails. I don't even know if you can see it. But these are what they have issues getting all the shed off of because they're so tiny. So make sure you have a humid hide in your enclosure because it can be hard for them to get all that stuck shed off, and it can cause them to lose those toe tips, which they need to climb. To create a humid hide, it's actually super simple. You can get sphagnum moss or frog moss or any type of moss that you would get at the reptile store. You want to wet it, and you can just stick it under a hide. I put hers in the cool end because the warm end, I think it would make the enclosure too humid. But basically, it's just a bunch of moss under a log. That's it. Super easy. If you can't afford a log, it's super easy to just use Tupperware. If you get some Tupperware, you can cut a hole in the lid. Make sure you like sand the edges or use like a soldering pen. And they can literally just crawl into that, and that'll be their humid hide. It doesn't have to be rocket science, and it doesn't have to be expensive. And it's super easy and maintainable that way. Okay, now we're going to talk about substrate. So substrate, what do you want to use? Well, I'll tell you what you don't want to use. Look at me. Don't use those crappy reptile carpets. You know what I'm talking about. I'm going to put them here. Don't use these. They suck. I don't even know why they exist. I don't know why we keep putting them out. Don't use them. I'm serious. This is why you shouldn't use them. Remember the toe tips I just showed you? They get stuck in there and they will literally rip their toenails off of their feet because they get stuck in the carpet and they can't get out. This doesn't just happen with leopard geckos. It happens with bearded dragons. It happens with other lizards that you keep on there. Just don't get the carpet, you guys. If you are worried about them ingesting substrate, you can use paper towels. You can use like blue shop towels that are like they're like more of a microfiber cloth. Tile too, even if you wanted to, if you're worried about your baby leopard gecko ingesting any of the substrate, which is something to be concerned about, but just don't get a carpet. It's awful for them. So this is what I do recommend. I use a mixture of topsoil and play sand for Banana's enclosure. She was on paper towels for a long time. I just transitioned her about a month or two ago. You want a mixture of substrate that is light and airy. You want it to stay arid. You don't want it to get super moist, but you also want it to be light enough that they can dig and burrow, because these guys will burrow in their hides. I get my topsoil and my play sand from Lowe's, actually, believe it or not, and I'll put a picture of them and I'll put a link in the description of where you can buy all the products that I'm discussing today. That's what I recommend using. You can also use a mix of play sand, topsoil, and excavator clay. I just didn't have any excavator clay with me. Now, what is the mixture? I use a 2-to-1 ratio. I have 2 parts sand to 1 part topsoil, and that's because these do live in drier desert areas. Something I would steer clear of if you are wanting to put them on sand is any type of like calcium sand or those like dyed sands, because they will try to eat it. Like if it's a calcium sand, they can smell that there is calcium in the sand and they will try to eat it. So I would stay away from that. Now, if you want to do a bioactive setup, go right ahead. I think a bioactive setup is great for these guys. So usually I recommend doing a bioactive setup. I don't have one for her because her enclosure is so small, but I will be doing bioactive with her when I put her in the 25-gallon. Let's talk about enrichment for your gecko. So enrichment consists of things to mimic their natural habitat to make them feel covered, secure, and exercised. Where can you get enrichment? Well, you can get enrichment from pretty much anywhere. You can get enrichment from reptile stores in the forms of hides. There's vines, there's sticks and twigs and logs and all that kind of stuff. Cork rounds are great. What I recommend, and here is my secret, I'm gonna lean in close so I can tell you, all of my enrichment is from the Dollar Tree. That's the secret. All of my enrichment is from the Dollar Tree. I get my plants from the Dollar Tree. I get hides from the Dollar Tree. I get whatever else from the Dollar Tree. Climbing sticks. The sticks that I have in this stick, ooh, blooper reel. This stick right here, that is the dowel rod of a plunger that you can get at Dollar Tree. If you think I'm paying $30 for some cheap looking vines, you got another thing coming. I can get plants and everything that I need from the Dollar Tree for $1.25. Okay, I am poor and I am interested in owning all these, and if I want to have all of these reptiles, I better start learning ways to save money. So that's your money saving tip. Go to the Dollar Tree or the thrift store. A lot of my stuff is from the thrift store as well. Everything in this enclosure, Dollar Tree and the thrift store. The only thing that's not is the aspen, which I got from Walmart. So you want to make sure that you have enough ground coverage, because like I said earlier, these guys will run around on the ground and they'll feel a lot safer if they can be covered. This can be with flowers, this can be with vines. I use a lot of foliage. I got this like really tall plant from a Savers and I took it out of the pot, washed it, and then stuck that in there. So that's what those leaves are back there. They're just big frond leaves and they're plastic, so they're perfect and easy to clean. So one of the most commonly asked questions when keeping leopard geckos is, can I keep them with others or can I cohab them? And most people will tell you no. And for the most part, I agree with that. I think if you are a beginner, if you've never owned a reptile before, if this is your first reptile, no, you should absolutely not keep them with other ones, just for the safety of the animal. Now, that being said, in the wild, scientists have found them in groups. They will stay together in groups in rocky outcrops. So yeah, they can technically live together if you have a large enough enclosure with plenty of hides, plenty of food dishes, plenty of water dishes, and plenty of enrichment that they're not going to start fighting over it. Now, I would not put more than one male in an enclosure because males can be pretty territorial and they can fight and will fight with each other. But for females, you can absolutely keep a group of females together if you have a large enough enclosure. If you have a large enough enclosure and you really want to cohab these guys and you are not a beginner, then yeah, I don't see why not, honestly. And that's a hot take. A lot of people will tell you no, but I don't see the problem with it if that's something they encounter in the wild. All right, let's go over their diet. So the leopard gecko, like I said earlier, eats insects or invertebrates. My big three is mealworms, crickets, and dubia roaches. Not necessarily in that order. I would actually put crickets first, then dubia roaches, then mealworms. That's my big 3 when it comes to these guys. However, there's some other stuff that you can supplement if you need to, like discoid roaches, hornworms, and black soldier fly larvae are also good main meal components. But you want a varied diet for these guys. You can give them on occasion, like I do with Banana. I give her waxworms as a treat. You can give waxworms, butterworms, and superworms as a treat, but very rare. They shouldn't have them as a main staple in their diet just because of their fat content. So leopard geckos, if you don't know, are very prone to getting overweight because they aren't being fed the right diet. So just make sure if you're feeding waxworms, it's every once in a while, not for a stable part of their diet. A very common issue with leopard geckos that rescues also see is a vitamin A deficiency. They have hypovitaminosis A, which is a lack of vitamin A. So hypovitaminosis A is a very, very common issue in leopard geckos, and it usually is because they're not getting enough variation in their diet. Some of the symptoms with hypovitaminosis A is they have eye issues, severe eye issues, like their eye caps can get stuck. They get plugs in their eyes of like just huge vitamin A capsules in behind their eyes. They can lose their eyes or go blind from it. They can have mouth issues like mouth rot, mouth irritations, and it can make it hard for them to eat. And also they'll suffer from dysecdysis. And dysecdysis is basically poor shedding, which we've already talked about poor shedding, but that's just another way to prevent it is just by feeding them a varied diet. So you need to make sure you're giving them a varied diet, pretty much. So that's why I feed her crickets, dubia roaches, and mealworms. I rotate them all out. And you want to dust them with calcium every other feeding. It doesn't have to be every feeding. Some people do. It's fine if you don't. Every other feeding minimum is what you want to dust them with vitamins. Or calcium. I use the Fluker's brand of calcium. It's calcium with D3. I'll show you guys and I'll put a link in the description. Okay, enough with the heavy. We're going to talk about handling. And handling is something I love to do with my leopard gecko, but she's on my shoulder right now. Let me see if I can get her. Handling is one of my favorite things to do with my leopard gecko. That being said, they are a very handleable species. You want to slowly introduce it to them because it can stress them out when they're babies. You, believe it or not, are a very big predator to these guys. Your hands reaching over the top into their enclosure to reach them out looks like a bird trying to pick them up. So it's really important that you take your time when trying to handle these guys. Let them have their time, take their time to learn that you are safe and a safe space for them. Do not handle your new leopard gecko for at least a week after you bring it home. That includes getting a rescue. If you get a rescue or an adult leopard gecko from a pet store or anything like that, that includes them too. Give them at least a week. Let them know their surroundings. Let them get comfortable in their home. And then we can try and start handling. Now, for Banana, we're at the point now where I can just reach in and I just pick her up. She kind of like scurries a little bit, but once she's up, she's good. As you guys can see, she's been super chill. I took her out right before I started this video and she's been just fine. I am always like super surprised by how much personality Banana has. She is a diva. She loves her food. She loves to beg for her food. She's also so curious. She's always, you know, looking around her enclosure and it's almost like she's thinking and I love that. I'm very glad to finally have a leopard gecko in my collection. I've wanted one for a while just because my mom and my sister have one and I wanted to be part of the leopard gecko gang. I felt a little left out. So I'm glad that I have Banana. She makes a great addition to the Curious Exotics family for sure. So with that, I just want to thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you guys for listening to me today about leopard geckos. I hope you learned something. If you did, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Ring the bell if you'd like. And you can follow us on Instagram at Curious Exotics. And you can also also find us on Facebook at Curious Exotics as well. Thank you guys so much again for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your week. I'll see you guys next week. Thanks so much. Love you. Bye.